Hello, welcome to Bay Area Women's Theater Festival Amplify Artist Conversations. I am Erin Merritt, and I'm an instigator on the Amplify team. With theaters closed to the COVID-19 pandemic, our Amplify 24-hour performance event, originally scheduled at Brava Theater for April 18th and 19th, with 70-plus performances by over 200 artists. The in-person version is on hold, although we will actually be broadcasting some events on April 18th. Keep your eyes open for that notification as we are able to schedule it. In the meantime, we refuse to allow the need for social distancing to keep us from amplifying our work and the work of the amazing women, non-binary, and trans artists of the Bay Area. So today we're going to be in conversation with Elena Wright, an amazing actor and fight choreographer. And I'm going to talk to her about her journey to becoming an actor, to becoming a fight choreographer, and anything you might want to know about working as a fight choreographer or learning to do stage combat in the Bay Area. You can find out more work about us at www.bayareawomenstheaterfestival.com. And if you want to support Elena Wright further, you can Venmo her at venmo.com/Elena-Wright. And that's ELANA-WRIGHT. All right, without further ado, I want to welcome Elena to the conversation. Hi, thank you for joining me today.
Hi,
How are
Erin.
you?
Thanks for having me.
How are you making it through this time of social distancing?
Oh, well, I'm very fortunate to have just recently moved to Marin, and I am the end of my street ends in a trail, so I can access some local trails so I don't have to stay cooped up in the house. Been making some Instant Pot recipes, catching up on some books, and filmed productions of Shakespeare that I haven't seen and wanted to, and spending some time getting to know my demons.
Excellent. Yeah, so are we all.
Mhm.
Luckily, I think theater people tend to be aware that everybody has demons,
Yeah.
and to be able to see how you to understand that you can plug them into your art to make your art better. So,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
welcome back to your demons, and welcome to the refining of your art.
Thank
Um,
you.
so, tell me a little bit about how you came to theater.
Well, I think I started by when I was a little girl. I would put on like these shows where I wasn't really doing anything. I would play the piano, but I didn't know how to play the piano, or I would just try to get people to like gather and watch something happen. Um, and I think like many people, desiring of love, and it was like one of the first places where I felt loved and accepted, and that I had a voice. And I've come to, I think, evolve my why I'm here and why I'm staying in theater, less so for my own personal voice, although that is still always evolving and important to me, but making space for other people's voices and other stories, and a place to connect to something greater than just one individual or a group of individuals, but how we all connect. I guess that's
Hmm.
sort of the largest view. Then I did plays in high school, and that was also kind of where I found my social group, people who were unconventional, didn't quite fit in the normal slots of you're a this or a that. That was kind of my first place where I found true friends.
Nice.
Hmm.
And tell me a little bit about how you came to performing stage combat, how you came to choreographing stage combat.
Yeah, well, I was, I grew up in a small town called Wareham, Massachusetts, and it was next door to another small town called Carver, Massachusetts, and there was a Renaissance fair there. And one of the first things I ever did or saw was, sword fighting, and I was part of a little show that was washing well wenches, and we had some stage combat in our show. We had quarterstaff and we had some unarmed combat. And at the time, I was super young. I was like 14 or 15. But I was working with people who were older and who worked in the theater. And I just was like, what is this thing where I get to be a girl and fight? And I've always been attracted to it. I always wanted to do more of it. Um, After that, I studied theater in college and I ended up working at the Medieval Manor in Boston, Massachusetts. And there were a couple of other folks who worked there who were part of the New England fight directors. That would be Craig Handel and Jim Beauregard. And um, they, I think, had background in dance and gymnastics. They also did a lot of sword work, and their work was very physical. There were lots of flips and throws, and it was all because I had sort of a dance background. They sort of brought me in to be part of just a we briefly traveled to schools doing like scenes and fights. And I guess at that point, I was like 18 or 19. And again, it was so thrilling, so freeing, so exciting to get to be, this girl who had a weapon, which at least up until that point felt so far from what was possible for me in terms of being able to be strong and aggressive and, or, quote unquote, aggressive, strong, violent. I have always, I think, registered as to other people as, cute and sweet and nice. And those were not the things that I felt inside. I felt rage and frustration and anger. And it was such an outlet to get to express something other than I felt what was offered to me in terms of storytelling. So I feel really lucky that I got that as a younger performer. And then just over the years, having studied theater in college and then again in graduate school, and then coming to the Bay Area, I was lucky enough to meet Dave Mayer pretty soon after I moved here. And having had throughout my, career bits and pieces of exposure to stage combat, it was kind of, it came easier, I think, than some other things, especially when people were looking for a female to help out with choreography or fight work. Having that perspective, I think I just kept gravitating in that direction. And getting, doors kept opening in that direction. And I kept walking through them. But I still, I think, had a hard time seeing myself as capable or strong enough or, I still feel like when I demonstrate unarmed that, I look too much like a dancer, too much like a girl when I throw a punch. And, it's still something I struggle with to feel like, no, this is my body and this is how it moves and this is how it meets violence, because every body I think can tell a different story. And what is smart and right for a male body may not be the same tactic that a female body or even a different kind of male body would use in a fight. So I think it's been somewhat a blessing for me to have a different perspective on combat than maybe the typical, strapping, buff, strong, male identifying person.
Yeah, that leads right into one of the next questions I had, but I actually want to circle back on a couple of things really quickly. So I want to pick back up on this in a moment. Can you tell us just a little bit about, I had the same kind of experience of being, always typecast as the little cute ingenue or the kid or whatever, and feeling like no, my place is in the big strong roles, even though my body doesn't say that to people.
Mm.
Um, And I know when I first picked up a sword, I had that a kind of a Sweeney Todd moment of that, like, at last my arm is complete again moment, you know? It just felt so right, and so I wanted to just have you expand a little bit on what what made it feel so transgressive to you? I'm putting the word transgressive in your mouth, but, what made it feel so unexpected? Did it feel like an external, people don't want me to do this, or they don't see me as this, or did it feel internal, or, I don't know if I can do this, or I think I heard a little bit of both in what you said.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think it is, somewhere deep inside us, or at least in myself, there's a little chicken or the egg. Is it I've been
Mhm,
conditioned that way, or is it um, something from me, or is it both? And I think it is a little of both.
mhm,
I never had, I have always had, in terms of my family, a very supportive family. I never had anyone say, you can't do this.
mm,
But I did, experience that kind of um, I don't know, the feeling of the last one being picked for the kickball team, in terms of not being chosen for something that I clearly had more experience and skill with over someone who just, looked more appropriate for what story they wanted to tell. Um,
mhm.
and, just clocking that over and over and going, oh, I see. Oh, I see. That's not for me. When people would always ask me, what's your dream role? Or, what would you like to do most? I always found myself, like you said, gravitating towards things that other people um, didn't necessarily agree with. I'd look at roles and go, I want his role. I want that part. I want the one with the weapon. I want the one that gets to be ambitious or independent or the warrior. I don't identify with the archetypes of or the tropes of mother, sister, lover, provider, nurturer. While those things are a part of me, that's not my personal life's path or truth or story at this point.
Right, it's not what your soul sings to play.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Mhm.
it was really about finding that match between what you internally felt like you wanted to say and do and what felt comfortable to you, and and finding a way to express that when the outside of you doesn't match what people imagine that type of character to look like.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting that you said you were I was thinking about your dance training maybe being a detriment, or that people were seeing something as too dancey. And I remember, I don't know if you remember Bob Borwick, but I remember him coming to a show of mine years ago and saying, actually, it was before he came to a show, but he was talking about working with women as fighters and saying he always loved to work with women because they were more likely to have dance training.
Mm,
And so they were more likely to understand that a fight is a partner dance. It's
mm,
not an opponent situation.
mhm.
And so they were more likely both to take care of their partners, but also to really pay attention to the choreography and the execution of it, and to already know in their bodies how to do that. Whereas most of the men he was working with were people who had, picked up sticks from a young age and whacked each other with sticks, and it's just sort of a different way of entry into the whole choreography
Exactly.
situation. And actually there was a moment in, and I'm sorry to talk so much about myself, but this gets to me every time I think about women and choreography. We were doing Coriolanus, which, as you probably know, has like 9 fights in it or something, extended fights in it. And he was watching that and he said, I was enjoying watching these women. I'm like, God, they're so fluent in their movement. It's so beautiful. The fights are so lovely, and yet violent. But then around the 6th fight or so, I started thinking, "Wait a minute, why are they fighting about this? Why aren't they just talking it out? It's not that big of a deal."
Mm, mm,
Um, and then said, "Wait a minute, why is it?" I would never ask that question if I were watching male bodies fighting.
yeah.
What is it in me and in society that causes me to think um, women to expect women to talk something out and expect men to fight something out?
Yes.
What is that expectation? And how do I? And now I've noticed that, how do I change my thinking about how I choreograph?
Mm. Exactly. So much
Not a
of this
question,
work is
but I
about,
thought yes, yeah. So
yeah, well,
that leads
so much of it is about noticing yourself and listening to what your partner's instincts are. At least in terms of choreography, um, I I often will come in with a frame of what could be done, but I would much rather listen to um, my actors' instincts and help them build the fight that fits their body and their intuition, and really, yeah, listen to how they want to move, or what their instinct would be, and help them do it safely.
Yeah, and I hope any good choreographer is going to do that. Certainly, the many wonderful choreographers I've worked with do that. I don't think that's not necessarily in and of itself a female thing to do. It's a good practitioner thing to do. But I do, but understanding that people come into the room with different backgrounds, different framing around violence, real violence and staged violence, I think does make the experience a little different for women, non-binary people, trans people. Maybe bring some other things into the room with them that are often different from what cishet men are bringing into the room.
Mm.
And wondering if you agree with that, and if you, given that what you were going to be doing, what you will be doing eventually at Amplify, is a stage combat class for women, non-binary, and trans people. Um, how is that different? What do you expect out of that? Why would one do such a class?
Well, I think that, well, two things. I think that we all bring something with us. And as I've also been doing more intimacy choreography work, and receiving training in that area. Um,
Actually, can you take sorry to interrupt you. Can you tell us a little bit about that for people who don't know about this relatively new field of intimacy direction?
oh, yeah. So, intimacy training or intimacy choreography is about taking any moment that requires either contact or sexual content or intimate content, and choreographing it as mindfully as you would choreograph violence. So, taking into account what the story needs, what the director wants, and added and taken into account what the actor is comfortable with doing, and choreographing that without it. Um, in the past, actors were often left to choreograph these moments themselves, which led to, so you can imagine all kinds of things that you don't want to have happen in a play in the theater. So this new field is really trying to address that, and protect artists from, you know anything that could happen. So the other thing I wanted to speak to is that what I have noticed is that men often don't feel the permission to have pain around, well, to have pain or to express it.
Yeah.
So sometimes they feel shame for having trauma, or for having fear, or for not being what is expected of, the masculine, or the
Exactly.
male identifying. So sometimes it's a different kind of work, in letting them know that it's okay,
Mhm.
to not be okay, or to not, or to have input that isn't just about how can you be better, stronger, faster at this, but how can you be kind to yourself and make sure that the work you're doing is sustainable. Um, and so going back to your
Actually, no. So let's
Yeah.
stick to that for 1 second because that's making me realize I should have asked a different question first, which is how does a stage combat class or choreography session, do you have a sense of how that's different with a woman leading it than with a man leading it? Does that automatically give the men in the room that a little more permission? Or is that just
Hmm.
something you as a
Well,
person tend to lead with because you're aware of it? Or is
I don't
stage
know.
com I
I've
mean,
never
I
taken
think choreography,
that. um,
like, I think people are changing the way that they teach stage combat now too. Like, it really did used to be just that sort of hyper masculine, stereotypical room that you would walk into,
mhm,
and
mhm.
I that is changing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've been lucky in that my mentors and teachers, for the most part, have not been that. They've actually been very. I mean, yes, most of them have been male identifying, but they have also been incredibly sensitive and caring. Um, uh, Outliers, I guess, if that is the norm for people's experience in this work. Yeah, I've had at least 4 male mentors who were not, I guess, overly aggressive or pushing of, speed or intensity over connection and care. So I do feel very lucky that there are really incredible men doing this work as well. But
Mhm.
yes, I think the culture overall, is shifting. Our language is shifting our awareness, and is moving generally in a forward direction on that for sure. Um, so, in terms of what stage combat is meant to do, I would say, just in a nutshell, is to provide a framework for the violence in any given show to make sure that it is, first of all, safe, repeatable, consistent, and tells the story. So, and depending on what the playwright has given us to work with, building it from scratch, making something up, expanding on it, adding to it. So there is a different, and working with the director on what kind of story they are trying to tell, and working with the actors on how they can tell it with their bodies and their voices and their beings.
Yes, and with whatever history they've brought into that room and
Hmm.
as well, yeah. So then I guess the question changes to, is there a reason to have a stage combat class that is only for women or that is only for women, non-binary, and trans people? And if
I
so, what
think,
would that be?
yeah, I think definitely. Uh, you know, there's always that person who's going to be in the back of the room unless they feel like there is space for them. And uh, especially in stage combat, and wonderfully so. I mean, I think that everybody certainly needs a place to express things like rage and, real, animal, human experiences. And I think often, definitely, I think male identifying humans are not given that permission enough. So
Mhm.
when they get the opportunity in stage combat, they often bloom in a way that sometimes I think can leave the females struggling with different things. So I think having a class just for women, um, just makes that space for the female experience to be just a little bit wider. Not every woman may need that, but for those that do, there's a place for it.
Mhm.
And I know I'm different when I'm in a room full of women as opposed to a room full of men, as opposed to a room that's mixed. It's not something I'm trying to do, but it is
Mhm.
something that is embedded. So allowing a space for us to not have to be fixed, to not have to be perfect or right, but to explore and be safe and try things maybe before we take it back to a more co-ed world.
Hmm.
Just knowing that there is a place where that can happen is going to give people who needed that space room. So I think it's
Mm-hmm.
vital. I think it's something that I wish I could have. I don't know that I've had a lot of experiences with um, just a room full of female fighters. Not enough. I would certainly love more.
Yeah.
And
Well, and,
not
oh, go
that
ahead.
there's anything wrong with men and what they're doing. It's nice to have all kinds of spaces,
Yeah.
especially when you have any group that tends to dominate. It's nice to make spaces without that built into the experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, I'm also thinking about, and I'm trying to kind of scan through what's being written now because it's changed so much in the last 15, 20 years.
Mm,
Um, in terms of most of the violence, it used to be almost all of the stage violence was either men against men
mm,
or men against women. There was very rarely women against women or women being the violent person in the room.
mhm,
It was mostly the woman being acted upon. And so it used to be that it was vitally important that women get a little, maybe even a little extra training because they were going to be in the victim situation, which is the more dangerous situation and the one that needs to lead the choreography, right? To ensure the safety. Um, and I often found that women were, because that was also real in life,
mm,
were automatically brought in a little bit of personal fear with them. Again, not saying that there aren't also men who have that experience because there certainly are, but that there was a large percentage of women came in not so much feeling I shouldn't be doing this, but I am deeply personally afraid of these moves.
mhm,
And so there was that kind of extra time and space to give them to make them feel confident so that when they were then in a play in which they had to be, for example, choked to death, which
mhm.
tends to really freak a lot of people out, um, be a particularly sensitive move for a lot of people, that they already were able to bring in some confidence and some ability to advocate for themselves to keep themselves safe,
Exactly.
and to know that they had that ability to do that.
Mhm. Absolutely. Um, yeah, the you know the best fighters are the ones who lose. So it is the the sometimes well, there's all kinds of different hard, but
Yeah,
for
yeah,
certain folks, that is the harder role, and yeah, the one where there is some some more risk baked into some of those moves, and especially if you're a female in those roles who've experienced any kind of trauma or violence like that in your actual life, um, even if you think you're okay, you don't know what those physical reenactments will unlock and trigger,
mhm,
and it's sometimes surprising. And making sure that there's space for that, and uh, training and awareness and room made for that as well is something that I think is also getting better and changing and opening up in our um, in general in the field. And for those folks who, on the other side, it can be really traumatic and terrible to be the one enacting violence on
yeah,
someone who is suffering. Um, so, kind of addressing everyone in the room and taking care of everyone. Like the people who have to love each other most in this field are the ones who have to do the most terrible things to each other on stage.
yeah.
So, I mean, it really is, even though intimacy work is opening up as another field in terms of often in terms of sexual content, violence is incredibly intimate, and I think just the the language and the awareness and the waking up that people are doing around intimacy work is, I think, also so valuable for work in violence as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad that this is emerging as a new field, and also that it's merging with stage combat work. It's such a natural fit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we've been pretty serious here for a moment, so I'd love to just get back to a little bit of fun, and talk to me about a greatest impact moment of some fight choreography that you've done, or a favorite or trickiest fight move that you weren't sure how to get it just right, and that you figured out a creative solution for, or anything like that. What was most fun moments?
Hmm. Um, well, I am lucky enough to get to work with a lot of younger folks. I would teach a lot at the high school level. And so, just in general, getting kids in their bodies and giving them vocabulary to talk about and work with violence is, especially sending out younger people to colleges and into the professional world, you know, even having had as much experience as I did when I was younger, I also had some terrible experiences, and didn't always know how to advocate for myself or protect myself. And just in general, feeling like I can send a lot of my students off with tools and with experiences that hopefully will just let them be themselves and be strong and be artists who can move forward in this work without um, becoming victimized or hurt in their futures. Okay, so that's general. I the play She Kills Monsters that everybody does these days at every school ever. Um, I've been lucky enough to choreograph it several times, and every like I don't have a specific like moment, but I can pick out lots of moments where, with working with young women and asking what they can bring. You know, I've worked with gymnasts and cheerleaders and people who've never held a weapon or hardly moved their bodies before, and asking them to tap into their own instincts and their own intuition about how to be, both sexy and strong. Because, if you're not familiar with the play, there's an element of, well, I wouldn't say necessarily typical sexiness, but like power and
Mhm.
um, Dungeons and Dragons. So
Uh-huh.
there's fun costumes, and there's elves that are lesbians, and all kinds of things that are um, maybe a lot for teenagers to deal with, but it's been such a joy to watch them feel um, excited to tell their story, excited to be in their bodies, excited to engage other fighters, often other female fighters, um, and to watch them turn into, little by little, the women that they will be,
Mhm.
where they
Mhm.
have a voice, they have agency, they have power, um, they know themselves, and they've taught me a lot. There were some really fun moves that we did with this one cheerleader, with splits and jumps and all kinds of things that she was like, "Well, I can do this," and I was like, "We
Mhm.
can use that," and she's like, "Well, I can do this too," and I'm like, "We'll use that too," and just watching her um, go from just going, well, these are some cool like dance moves I can do, to feeling like I could be badass with these moves, and
Mhm.
seeing um, everyone in the room, male, female, and everything in between, respect her and applaud her work. But that's been across the board. But definitely that show has been so instrumental, I think, in bringing strength and expression to young women. And I certainly know I wish I could have done that show in high school.
Absolutely.
I also did Henry Four Part One with an all female cast in high school, and
Mm.
getting them to swing swords and have shields was, again, something that I think a lot of them were intimidated by, but by the end, I think they were totally like um, ferociously in love with by the end.
Beautiful. Well, that seems like a good place to end this. I want to ask you to tell us where people can find you if they want to hire you to do stage combat when and if we're ever allowed out of our houses again, or if you have any plans to um, do any online content. I mean, that's always tricky with combat because it can be
Mhm.
unsafe.
Yeah.
Is there anything that people should know about where to find you when they can?
Um, yeah, right. I should be better about having a website. I suppose that's a project I should get on in this uh, bit of downtime quarantine. But my email is creatureface@gmail.com. That's probably the best way to get in touch with me. And, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, all those places. I do work with Dueling Arts International and Dueling Arts San Francisco. That's um, headed up by Dave Mayer and the amazing Carla Pantoja. And yeah, I'm around. Um,
Yeah, I am
on that
trying to. I
website.
foolishly did not look up there. Oh, yeah, and if you want to find Dueling Arts International, that's www.duelingarts.com. And they're Dave Mayer, Carla Matoja, everybody there is also marvelous and amazing. All right, so I just want to close by saying if you want to help Elena out during this break in most of our work, you can Venmo her at www.venmo.com/ELANA hyphen WRIGHT. That's ELANA hyphen WRIGHT, even though her name is spelled ELENA on this interview. All right. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a nice pleasure to hear your voice and to connect with you from afar. And
Me.
looking forward to seeing you when we get back to being able to do Amplify in real life.
Oh my goodness, so much. I'm gonna give everybody the biggest hugs
Oh, God.
or
Yeah.
consent, but
Right. Oh, yes. You'll be running at people going, "Do I have your consent to hug you right now?" And we'll be going, "Yes."
yes.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, you too, Erin.
Bye.